Hi. Um, so back again. The sermon this week was heavy. It was on abortion and uh end of life. Voluntary assisted dying. That's what it was on. I'm gonna mainly focus on the abortion part, and the reason I took so long to do this is because, well, how else do I put this? That's a heavy topic. That's a big topic. It's a controversial topic. There's a lot there, and well, we had small group, so I decided to push it off until small group. Well, mentally, I've decided after small group I am ready to tackle that. It's a big topic. Um, the New Life is the church I go to. I don't know if I've said this. Also, I just want to clarify, just because I go to this church, I do not represent this church whatsoever. My views do not reflect on them. I think I've worn my church shirt before. I may be part of these organizations. This is completely different. Just clarifying for everyone, these are my own. This is very much my own thing, not connected to other organizations at all. But I will reference them because they are part of my life, obviously, and they form my faith. Therefore, mentioned. But basically, New Life. It's currently the 2nd of November 2020. It'll be in the critical conversations thing, and if you this week, it will be the last sermon of the month. We probably have released on the 11th, the first of the 11th, because anyway, basically it will be made very clear that's what the topic of the thing is, and I think you should look at it because it handles it very, very well, very artfully, very good. But I still want to discuss things about it, but more things that it brought up in my mind. And it brought up in my mind the idea that things can be legal and still be sins, which is obviously true because I have sinned. I've also broken laws, I've just realized. Mainly jaywalking laws. But those jaywalking laws probably aren't sins. Okay, let's just ignore that. But the sins that a lot of my sins that I've committed definitely haven't broken any laws. They've just been me being not necessarily the best person sometimes. And no one can do that all the time. But then no one's God, so no one's perfect, and that's just accepted. It's human. Mistakes happen, but it's kind of like that idea of sins happen. That doesn't mean they're illegal. So it's kind of like that was a thing that popped up to me, and I realized, and it was more kind of in relation to abortions. Abortions happening in the background and illegally normally end up with people in more danger. So it's better for them to happen legally. Meaning, and Roe v. Wade also just in general should not have been overturned like that. The whole problem with that, it's you have a bigger problem there than just whether or not abortion is a sin, and it's another thing, abortion being murder, and it's okay, well, yes. That's something we need to confront. But there's a lot more to the topic than just that, and one of the biggest problems with abortion is the fact that a lot of the time it happens, it definitely should be a choice that's there, it should be a choice that's available, but it shouldn't be the only choice. And because of the broken systems that exist in place and that exist in the world, it is the only option sometimes. And sometimes that option isn't even taken, and that leads to horrific things. But it's should this be a choice? And it's legally, yeah, okay, it should be a choice, but it also shouldn't be the only choice. And that's actually a problem. That's a broader problem that exists in the world, that sometimes the women in those situations feel like that's their only choice. That's not good. That's not a good thing. The whole point of my body, my choice, you should actually be able to make a choice. If you can't, not having the baby because of financial difficulties, those financial difficulties need to go away. They don't because systems in place are corrupt, but Am I talking sense? Like, if you feel like that's the only choice because of societal pressures, you're not making the choice. Society is. Meaning society needs to start changing. Does that make sense? Like, and I know there are lots of other situations, but it's like, but let's be honest. If you look at the statistics, and I don't want to reduce some of this stuff to statistics because that's stupid as well, but like, they're a minority. Most of it happens because of financial troubles, and that's not good. Or most of them happen because of shame culture, where let's admit it, the church has been very bad. It's like, if you're a teenager getting pregnant and you're not married or you're not married or whatever, then you've committed a sin and you should be abandoned by the church. And it's like, that's the opposite of what should be happening, especially since the moment you're married, because the moment someone's married, even if it's a secular marriage, it's like, oh, it's fine, they can have married children you want. It's like, actually, no, from the purpose of the church, if you're condemning the people I'm just going to say this, if you're condemning the people who have children outside of marriage, you should be condemning the people who are only having children inside legal marriage, as in secular marriage. It's like, as the church, we believe it is a marriage is a relationship between a man, a woman, and God. And I don't necessarily agree with that fully. Like, I actually believe it could be between anyone, but God has to be involved still, because in my mind, it's a Christian concept that has been legalized in Western culture, and sure, other religions have the same proposals of marriage, but like Christian marriage, from my idea, that's how marriage should be. God has to be involved. In the secular world, God is not involved in marriage. Therefore, the sex that happens within is still a sin because it's marriage. You're having sex outside of marriage because. Ugh. Didn't expect that now, did you? But it's kind of like, oh, why is that a barrier? That it shouldn't. We should be loving and respecting everyone. Human decency. And that gets to the other point. Sex workers, they should be legal. Like, always. And like, I get the church probably doesn't like, oh, but so that's a sin. And it's like, oh yes, I very much agree that it is a sin. But women or men who are in that situation should still be treated with respect and dignity, because putting that underground and forcing it to go illegal only means it's more likely to have even worse things. Like, if it's illegal, then sexual trafficking is more likely to happen, meaning, and people being forced on themselves, and rape is more likely to happen in those situations. Like, yes, I agree that what's happening there is immoral. But that doesn't mean the people who are working in that industry should be without dignity. They deserve dignity. They deserve love, because there are reasons that they've chosen this profession of work that have nothing to do with what we've said, and the fact that we ignore them then means they get taken advantage of, and actually means that the person on the other end is actually doing something that's even more immoral and actually performing sexual harassment, performing rape, and it doesn't get prosecuted because we ignore it. That's actually even worse. We are actually, in some ways, we're letting a greater sin happen. Like, we need to actually regulate these things. These things need to be in the public spectre. They need to be regulated. Laws need to exist. Sometimes laws need to exist, and laws exist and are sins. I know that sounds weird, but it's the way. If we want to treat people with love and dignity and kindness, that's the way the world's gonna have to work. Because everyone deserves love, equality. Everyone deserves fair work. Everyone deserves respect. It doesn't matter what you do or how you act. It doesn't matter if you get an abortion or not, or if you're struggling. It doesn't matter if you've chosen to do sex work or whatever. You deserve love. You deserve kindness. You deserve respect. And as a church, I'm going to admit it now, we often, not only do we shy away and run away from the complicated questions, because the idea of this coming up in church was like, this is a heavy conversation. This was not talked about in church. Like, the idea of abortion, like, before hearing that message, I was like, yeah, abortion's fine. After hearing the message, I'm like, maybe abortion isn't fine. But I'm only thinking that because I'm actually going, oh, wait, this is a Christian issue. And every issue is a Christian issue. And normally I'm very good about this and making every issue a Christian issue in my mind. But I didn't do it for this one. And it was mainly because the only place I ever heard it being talked about was in a secular room. And now I'm like, maybe abortion isn't the best. But I also still don't think it should be made illegal. But it shouldn't be people's go-to option. And it shouldn't be the only option. Especially because, like, abortions happen if someone's going to have, like, Down syndrome. And it's like, what? You're just taking away a child's life just because they have Down syndrome. It's like, they deserve just as much love and dignity and the ability to live as anyone else. Just because, oh, you are literally, that's what, it's like, oh, wait, that's an actual thing. It's like, oh, because that's a thing. Like, Down syndrome has been almost eradicated. And I can't remember what country it is, but it's one of the European countries. It's like, oh, it's been almost eradicated through abortion. And it's like, oh, that isn't okay. It's like, because from my person, I'm like, oh, it gets complicated when it's like, I physically cannot look after the baby because I don't have the financial means to look after any child. Because I'm like only 25 or something. I'm in my 20s. I'm in my teen years. I can't look after a child. Or it's like, I will like, if I have the pregnancy, I will probably die, and so will the baby. Although that one's a lot less common because modern medicine works wonders. Or it's like, oh, it's rape, and it's like, I don't know what to do in that situation. It's like, I have been a victim of things and I don't want to carry this child. But also some people do want to carry that child and that's their option. But in that situation, it's like, that's a complicated mess of issues, and it's like, it's like, a beautiful thing of a child could come out of a terrible, painful experience, but also birthing process and the process of like the 9 months in maternity could be a very distressing thing. So it's like, what's the choice there? And also, you might be a teenager or a literal child, and then it gets even more complicated. It's like, it gets awkward. But conversations around that need to be had. The child, the person who's having that should not be forced to go through the pain of that, because childbirth is very painful. But we also shouldn't be disacknowledging the fact that having a child is just a beautiful thing in general. Like, life is astonishing in general. Think about that. Life. Anyway, I'm gonna go off topic, but it's kind of like, this issue is a lot more in depth than we believe, and it's a lot more in depth than the media want us to believe. It's like, you were either this or you're this, and I'm like, but I want to sit in the middle. Like, I want to sit in the middle on so many issues. And what needs to happen is everyone in the conversation needs to be treated with love and dignity. That's what we need. We need more human decency. It's scary that so little exists in the world. Ooh, also the other thing of like a little question of like, oh, should like women are allowed to do whatever they want with their bodies. It's like, oh, we can terminate if we want to. Oh, but men should also be like able to get financial adoption. It's like, but it's like, oh, men are forced to pay. And it's like, I think there's a misunderstanding here. I do want to address something here. It's like, okay, so if a woman wants to terminate, they can terminate. I don't think that's the best option, but the higher the chances are that they're terminating, either they've talked about it with their partner and they both agree, or their partner's left them, and in which case, if the partner's left and walked out of the situation, I think the partner, regardless of what the person, if they choose to terminate or not to terminate, I think the partner should be paying financial contributing financially, because that partner has chosen to abandon the conversation. It was their choice to abandon the conversation. If they had stayed and remained in the conversation and disagreements were had and then maybe walked out, then maybe we can discuss them and not having to give financial contribution. Compensate them not having to give financial compensation. But if they haven't given financial compensation, like basically it's like, if you've given financial compensation, but like if they haven't if they abandon the mother the moment the baby they know they're having a child, they lose all rights to decide whether or not the child will live or die. They lose all rights to say whether or not they want to be a part of the life of that child or not. If the mother has the child to term and has the baby, and wants the father to pay financial compensation, and they walked out on the mother, they are required to pay financial compensation. They were the ones that left the conversation. They were the ones who, quite honestly, were rude and insensitive. And because let's be honest, they have a much easier ability to just leave. For the mother to terminate the baby, they have to go through a very long, arduous process. There's a lot of paperwork and medical stuff that's involved in that. It's not an easy process. They can't just up and leave. Meaning it needs to be that same meaning I feel like there needs to be that same process on the male if they want to give up financial independence on them. Because it shouldn't be just as easy as we're leaving and I didn't want a child, therefore I don't need to have a child. And it's like, no, you were required to acknowledge that this is a fact of life and that's happened. That's actually something I'm very confident in. Anyway, Anyway, bye! So that's been a topic and a half.